Yeah, like I said, I went through a couple of chairs from Amazon, and that has been by far the best of them. The padding's held up really well, super comfy, and I'll use it for about 8-10 hours a day. Well, that was before I did my makeshift stand-up desk. So, but cool. Okay, we'll get started here then. So, uh, welcome everybody. We're gonna record this one too. I'll get this uploaded to our KC Unreal Devs YouTube after we are done. So that'll be good. If you guys, obviously, I assume everybody's made the switch over now too. But just as a reminder, the communities.unrealengine.com is where we are managing all of the announcements for the group. I don't know for how much longer it will continue, but when we do post a meeting on communities, it will propagate to Meetup. So if you guys are still using that, though, make sure you switch over to the communities.unrealengine.com. So with that, I don't think I'll do much of the intro. We've got a lot that we're going to try to cover today. I'm gonna let Steve take over here in a second and kind of do the intro. And after he's done with that, we are doing a deep dive into Perforce and UGS. My hope, again, I'm going to throw a lot of information out to you guys. I will make the slides available for you, so don't feel like you have to hastily take notes on everything. So I'll make this available to you guys afterwards. But ideally what I want to do is give you guys a tool set to be able to integrate Perforce, both the Perforce server and the client, as well as get UGS installed and running on there. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Sweet. So here's a lot of links that we always include in all the slides for a lot of just general content. Obviously the Unreal Engine website, and then the forums, the wiki for Unreal. I don't know if anyone else saw this, but that was recently taken down, and I believe there's a backup of it somewhere. I know I had a lot of bookmarked links from that, but they're working on a replacement for that if anyone was using it before. Epic Launcher and Learn tab. I wanted to specifically point out that finally in the Epic Launcher, in the Projects tab of your library, you can now sort and filter content, which is amazing if you have been collecting all of the free monthly content for the past year or so. So that's a nice welcome change. Unreal Slackers is a really big Slack community of Unreal devs, a lot of indie devs, a lot of professionals, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of active actual Epic employees there too. So that's a good community to get plugged in with. A couple of events coming up. I'll just jump to, I'll just talk about Unreal Fest now. Do you want to jump forward 3 slides? Yeah. So last year was the first Unreal Academy, and Unreal Fest is the sequel to that. I actually ran into Ryan there, and I had no idea he was going to be there. It was bizarre. It was in Raleigh, downtown, and it was a ton of people, very accessible event, a lot of really great educational content. Unreal Fest this year is going to be entirely online, and it is free. It's going to be a one-day event, July 14th. Tracks for different content, so architecture, automotive games, film, TV, live events across industry, and it's primarily intermediate to advanced content. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a little bit of beginner stuff last year, but it was mostly intermediate.
Yeah.
So I know I'm so pumped for this event. I'm telling my boss hey, I'm gonna be out that day. This is important. I'm gonna drag as many people this as I can because it's free, and all this content is current and the best people at Epic to talk about it. So it's gonna be really good. They will, I'm assuming, they will have all the content online in a few months at some point if you do miss it. But yeah, really excited about this one. You want to jump?
Yeah. You want the noteworthy? Yeah.
Yeah. So a few announcements that popped up since the last event. There's officially support for HoloLens 2 I don't know if anyone here develops for that or plans to, but it's been a while since we've had HoloLens updates, so that's nice to hear. There have been a lot of blog posts and news articles and showcases and premieres regarding virtual production recently. So there's this really cool blog post, NCAM and virtual production, you might want to check out. And then similar to that, ILM's VR virtual production toolset for Solo. They talk about that as well. And then the next slide is specifically about virtual production. They have a whole section of the page of Unreal dedicated to virtual production now because everybody wants to do it and it's so accessible and everything. I just found out yesterday there are 83 virtual production stages in the U.S. and none in the Midwest. Probably Chicago would be the closest, but certainly nowhere in Kansas City. I really wish I could get into this stuff. It obviously requires a pretty big cost with the screens and LEDs and getting all the hardware to work together, but the capabilities with virtual production is just incredible. There's also a behind the scenes that came out for Mandalorian recently. I haven't watched it yet, but it sounds like there's a lot of really good content in there if you're interested in learning more about that stuff too. I also saw that Mandalorian Season 2 is going to be doing a lot more of the same virtual production too. So I'm sure there will be a lot of attention around that. And lastly, if you want to jump, free monthly content is only going to be available until Thursday this week. I think that's when they roll it over to the next month. There's a lot of really good stuff in this last month you might want to check out. A lot of particle simulations, a few really good pre-made environments. That one on the top right has a really good master material for the landscape that I've already used for 4 different projects. A bunch of animated creatures. That one with the dragon, there's a whole pack with actual farm animals, which is really cool to see. And then that Polygon town pack, and then I think there's a city by the same studio. Mm-hmm. I've seen this pack everywhere in a dozen mobile games or something. But it's all free, so you should definitely grab it while you can. And then I'll be screaming from Twitter when the next stuff comes out and it's even better.
Nice. Cool. All right, so we're going to try something here too. I'm curious to see this one. So I want to try a live poll real quick to see. I always feel like a grandpa when we say that. But so I'm going to go to the next slide here. So you guys can do this. It's phone, web browser. Just do that, slido.com. And then on there, it'll ask you to put in that code L331. So the question is, what kind of file versioning method do you use? So the options are you don't use any, so you just save on your local machine, and that's about it. Backup hard drive, so something that you have just kind of sitting on the back, or file versioning software. And then separate there is the cloud. So I'll give a few seconds for everybody to answer.
Should have queued up some Jeopardy music.
Do, 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 do. Yeah. I think we need one more. Maybe that's it. Nice. So the majority of everybody here does use file versioning software. Awesome. Okay. Cool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll start jumping to it. All right. So like I said, this is going to be, I say a deep dive. I'm really, my intent with all this is that you guys will walk away with at least a tool set to get you guys up and running to use file versioning. Now, the one that I'm going to hit today is Perforce. Not that it's legal disclaimer where this isn't sponsored by Perforce in any means. The primary reason I'm going to pick it is, A, first and foremost, it's what I use on a regular basis. 2, it's what Epic uses in all of their projects. And 3, the integrations for it, especially with UGS. I don't believe UGS integrates with Git or subversion. So as far as I know right now, if you're planning on using UGS, you'll have to use Perforce with it. So, all right, I'm going to just cover real quick, just some high-level things to help just establish kind of the landscape for what file versioning is. So I've effectively called a few of these by some nicknames. So the risk taker is, for those of you that basically you don't have any file versioning, right? So you've got your file, you save it, you do some work, you save it again, and there's literally only one file. Obviously, you know the dangers in that. If you ever corrupt the file, you can't go back. Next one is called the hoarder. I'm guilty of this one sometimes too on active projects where you save multiple copies or multiple versions, multiple iterations. This is nice because you can go back at any point in time, but of course the downside is that it takes up a lot of space on your hard drive. Trusting in the cloud. Very dangerous, but it is what it is. So those of you that use like a backup like maybe Box or Google Drive, I did have a screenshot in here, but if you've ever run into working with a cloud-based document, you can go back to a previous version. It's nice. In a nutshell, saving to the cloud is very much like doing file versioning. It's just a lot more simplified for the end user. And then there's the backups to my backups. So for those of you that don't trust your hard drives or anything, right? You've got local files, you've got some on backup hard drives, some of those back up to servers, and those will back up to the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. This has a lot of redundancy in it, but obviously, if one of your files gets corrupt and you want to go pull from your hard drive, is it the latest? Okay, maybe I have to go to the server. So it just makes it a little bit more tedious on having to restore a file if anything ever happened. And then finally, this is kind of the precursor to me talking about Perforce and how that works, and that is the idea of working smarter and not harder. The idea being that you've got a central depot, and as you save that file or you commit, kind of changes to it, it will save an iteration of that on a server. So effectively on your machine, all you see is one file, but the server has some memory and some history of the changes to those files. So, okay. Another concept I'm going to cover really quickly is the idea of why file versioning would be great for a team structure. So this is kind of the basic workflow of working with file versioning on a team. So if we follow the chart kind of from left to the center, and you'll see the numbers kind of indicating the steps, right? So user number one on the team makes a change to a file. In this case, I'm using a text document just so it's easy to understand, but this can be any type of file in your production. So user number one makes a change to a file, commits it to a central repository or a depot, right? User number two checks that file out, makes some changes to the file, and pushes them back to the depot. User one then takes those changes and grabs them for themselves. That is the basic idea behind file versioning for a team. All right, so how would this work for a Perforce workflow, right? Like if you're making changes and stuff like that. So on the left, we've got user number one pushes some changes to the depot. User number two can grab those changes. User number two can push files. User number one can grab it, et cetera, et cetera. In the second image, what we have here is partially what starts to explain why using a program like Perforce makes sense. You can think of Perforce as kind of the brains behind the operation, right? So when user number one pushes some files to a depot, it's going to alert user number two, hey, your files are not up to date. So then user number two, so if we move to the third image, user number two pulls those changes, and now both user number one and user number two are in sync. They have the same files, they're identical, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, this is, I think, in my opinion, the most important and most critical aspect of why you would want to use file versioning, even if it's on a team of two people, or even if it's just yourself. It's this. So if we start from left to right, so right, user number one makes some changes to a file, and it pushes it to the depot. User number two grabs those. Everything is good. Everything is kosher. Let's say that user number two, so moving to the second diagram, user number two makes some changes to a file and accidentally corrupts something, or if you're in production, accidentally deletes half your map. I've seen it. Okay, they push those changes to the depot. User number one grabs it and goes, whoa, dude, you totally nuked half the map, right? If we didn't have file versioning, we'd be host. We'd have to go back and recreate that. If you recall in the diagram that I kind of said about working the smarter, not harder, the nice part about using file versioning is that your depot has a history, it has a memory of those files. So all user one has to do is go, okay, hey, I'm going to go roll back to the previous change, which you know was good, fix your stuff, and then go and commit. So by rolling back, you're able to regain that lost information from those files. So hopefully that all makes sense. You can see how that could save your butt a lot in production. But that is the general idea behind why you'd want to use file versioning for a team. Okay. Any questions before I start diving really deep into this on file versioning as a whole? I assume by the poll everybody's kind of using something, so shouldn't be too many questions. But if anybody has any questions, speak now. Cool. Okay. All right. So next I'm going to walk you guys through, first and foremost, we're going to step through Perforce, and then we'll get to UGS. All right, so this is Perforce install. Now, there's two aspects to Perforce that you need to be aware of. There's P4Admin and P4V. More than likely, your day-to-day workflow, if you're using Perforce, all you need to be concerned about is P4V. That is the client-facing user interface for Perforce. Now, if you're setting up a Perforce server, which I'll show you guys how to do here in a minute, you're going to want to use P4Admin. That is what allows you to go in, make changes to users, add users, remove users, add groups, make changes to your depot, obliterate files and changes, as well as permissions tables. So as we're going forward, I try to make a note of this, but just take into consideration P4Admin is the administration side, P4V is the client. Okay. So if you want to download Perforce, just go to that website. Don't ask me why. I think it's stupid, but it is what it is. It used to be called Perforce. It's now called Helix. Don't know why. But what you're looking for is Helix Core. That's going to be the server-side setup. Now, if you do download Helix Core. That is the server. Okay, so what this looks like when you go to install. Now, your install screen might be a little bit different, but it's very straightforward. You launch it, you put in the default port number, which I'll make note of this, 1666 is the default port. Generally speaking, you don't need to change it. It doesn't really conflict with other services that run in Windows, so it's totally fine. Username for the admin, you can set it to whatever you want. I'll show you guys how to change it later, but generally speaking, pick your name there. Click Start, click Install, and that's it. This will all go away, and you'll be like, okay, cool, what happened? So what it's actually done is it's installed all of the server components on your machine. So as it stands, after you do, again, Helix Core is what it's called. Once you install it, there's really no forward-facing interface. So I'll come to that in a second, but let me just show you real quick what is important to understand. So I've installed it. It's all running. Everything's good. I've got a screenshot of the actual file structure that is in Perforce. Now, in this case, it automatically defaults to the C drive, Perforce server. Okay, that's the actual server files that exist. What you guys should be aware of, especially you start using it more and more, of course, you're going to want to back up, whatever it is. You get a bunch of .db files. Those are the database files. That is essentially the brains of your server. So if this folder were deleted, your database would basically be gone. You wouldn't have any of the metadata. You wouldn't have anything associated with it. There's also another file in this folder structure called your journal. That is basically the depot, is what it is. So if you ever back anything up, go to the C drive program files, Perforce server. Inside of there, all you need to do is back up the database and the journal, and you effectively could restore your server at any given point if you had a catastrophic failure. So just be aware that that is where Perforce is going to install by default. My recommendation, because if you're doing a lot of files, make sure you've got a large hard drive, a large C drive for your Perforce server. Okay, so now that the server's installed, we need some way to access it. So that's where we're going to go to, and you can just search for it. I put the link down here so you guys have direct access to it. But you need to download the Helix Visual Client P4V. Included with this, I think I've got a screenshot of it. Yeah. Included with this install, you've got the ability to install 4 different things. The Helix Core P4V, so that is the one you'll use on a regular basis. You can use the merge and diff tool. I highly recommend it. The admin tool and the command line. So the admin tool and the command line are going to be more for your administrative side. So that's what we're going to use to be able to log in, make changes, make settings, you name it. Okay, so same thing when you go through this install, it's pretty straightforward. Now, something I'll make note of is during the install, you can input a server name and a username in there. You can change those later, so it's not super critical if you forgot about it. But what I do want to make note of is this server field. So generally speaking, there are a few methods for how you can set up your server. If it's on your local machine, so for example, I've got it running on my laptop right now. So all I need to have is just local 1666. It'll use localhost. Now I could put it on another PC on my network. In that case, I could use the my PC name :1666. I don't necessarily recommend this if you can, which I'm not going to dive too much into networking now. Generally speaking, it's a little bit better to do it based on IP, but of course then you've got to go ahead and put a static route in your router to make sure that IP never changes. But those are the 2 ways kind of on your local machine. You can do by PC name or by an IP :1666. Additionally, now if you guys are setting this up in the future and you're trying to do some kind of web-based redirect, if you've got a distributed team, message me. I'll help you understand how that is. But it is possible that you can set it up through a host name and redirect back to a dynamic IP. It's totally possible. I've done it on a day-to-day basis. So, okay. So once that's done, you're ready to go. So before we jump to the client side, I want to go ahead and just run through the administrative side. So when you launch P4Admin, this is what you'll basically get. So remote server, personal server, the server name, username. If this is your first time setting it up, you'll get prompted with this, I'm going to go ahead and create my name, my password, click save, and it'll pop up and say, if you proceed, you will become the sole user with super user access. Make sure you write that down. You remember your password. That is going to be your global admin. Now, you can set other admins up, but you've got to remember this one if you want to make any major modifications to your Perforce server install. Once that's done, this is basically the interface of admin. Now, I've blurred out some of the stuff because I want to show you a more kind of robust setup. But in particular, I'll just kind of go through the user interface very, very quickly to just kind of highlight the major points. So on your top bar, you've got your file, edit, view, administration connections. Generally speaking, all the tools that you need are embedded in there. Thankfully, the P4Admin side is very straightforward. There's not like a lot of hidden things or special commands. Everything that you need to access is directly in this interface. Moving on to number 2, we've got these different tabs. Now, these tabs always show you've got home, users and groups, permissions, and depots. Generally speaking, you'll set up your depot first, go in, set up some users, set up some groups, and then change your permissions. 3 and 4 are views of that. So I've got my users here and my groups on the side. Now, this center section will change depending on if you go to permissions or depots, but generally speaking, that is kind of your go-to. And of course, lastly, on 5 is the log. There's different things you can do for logging. I will say that the Perforce server itself is not super robust when it comes to logging. It just simply lets you know if somebody's logged in, commits changes, everything like that. One more thing I do want to point out, if you're kind of a command prompt style geek or you enjoy that kind of stuff, everything that that Perforce does runs through a command line. So you can actually push those manually, do it through command interface. The GUI just helps to make that process easier. So that's kind of what you see down here in some of this command line. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is set up your default depot. Now I've shown you just kind of an example of one that we use on a regular basis. You can set up however you want, but I do recommend at least just kind of setting up a basic folder structure where you've got just different things. Don't make it as just a general collect all. Go ahead and kind of separate it out. Something else I want to make note of too is that you can create, so the screenshot on the right is when you right click to create new depot. Something to keep in mind is that there are multiple types you can create. Generally speaking, if this is you're just setting up for a production environment or you're not trying to have a massive team, a local depot is generally the best route to go. It is possible to do streams. I don't know if you guys have heard of Perforce streams. I will tell you this, they can be a bit of a bear when it comes to trying to set them up for production. So my recommendation is if you're trying to decide between just a regular depot or a stream, do some research, test it before you put it in your production environment, because there are some limitations and there's also some benefits to either or. The other thing you can do is to keep in mind too, you can have multiple depots. You can even have backup depots and archive depots. But for the purpose of this, all we've done is just set up a basic depot. That's all that we need. One other note too is you can set up your depot to be on a separate drive. So let's say, for example, the server that you're setting up isn't super robust in terms of hard drive space, or let's say you've got a remote server that's got, 128 terabytes of storage space and you want to make that your depot. That is entirely possible. So if you see down here on the screenshot, storage location for version files, you can change that. Now, at any point, you can move that depot. Just keep in mind, and I'll show you in a screenshot here, you need to copy over the files first to the new location before you switch it, but it's entirely possible to have the depot on a separate machine than your server. Okay, so obviously the first thing you probably want to do after you've created your depot is create some users. It's very straightforward. Just go up to your user tab. You can right-click, click a new user. You'll basically put in a username, a password, and generally speaking, standard will be most of your common type of operator. Now, you can assign it to some groups, but of course, if you're first setting this up, you may not have some groups. But I do recommend create some users, and we'll create some groups. Which brings me to groups. So in my opinion, at least what I've seen from a production standpoint, it is much easier to assign permissions to groups than it is to individuals. So my recommendation is go ahead and just create a bunch of users and then create your groups and what they be assigned to. Put your permissions on your group. So in that same window, it's very easy. Just right-click, new group, browse users, add to group. Okay. Like I said, I'll include these slides. If you guys haven't worked with type map, highly recommend it. This is built into Perforce. Really, the only way you can do this is on the server machine. It's the easiest way. When you're logged into P4Admin, if you open a command prompt and type P4 type map, it will pop open this text document that looks like a temp. What a type map does, it allows you to specify certain rules for file types that get pushed to your depot. Especially if you're working with Unreal Engine, there are a few files that always have to have the same kind of permission, which I'll show here. A .lib file, a .pdb, .app, .exe. If you're pushing these version files to Perforce, your users download it, they try to build a project, it will scream at them every time, because in Perforce, you need the ability to make a file writable in a user's workspace, which is this plus W. So it's a binary file plus writable. Now, you can go in and manually set these for each and every file, which I will speak from past horror stories of pushing a source version file to Perforce that can get to, I know, for example, like the .libs, the .exes, and .pdbs, that can be as many as 250 plus individual files that you have to go into, right-click, make writable, right-click, make writable. If you have a type map, anytime a user pushes any of these files that you specify, .modules, .version, .target, .cs, whatever it is, your type map will preset the rules. So if I, say for example, create a new file, that's a .lib file, and I add it to Perforce, Perforce will look at the type map and go, hey, you're adding a .lib file. I need to make it writable. And it will set those permissions automatically. So if you're setting up using for UE4, literally just copy what I have up on screen, and it will save you a lot of time. Okay. I'm going to leave this up real quick. These are just some handy commands that you may need to use, especially if you're on the administration side. You need to make backups, verify your depot, make a checkpoint, need to reset your password or the IP address to the root. This is what you want to use. Okay. The Perforce client setup. So this is going to be P4V. So remember at the beginning I said we've got P4Admin, which is what we just covered. Now it is P4V. So I do want to ask a quick question, and I guess you guys can chip in. How many of you guys use Perforce right now? How many of you guys use something else?
I use it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we use it, but not very diligently.
Okay.
I also use it.
Cool.
Yeah, I used it in college, but now I just use Git.
Okay, cool. Oh, perfect. So you guys are at least familiar with the interface, and so that'll make this really good. Okay, so when you launch P4V, there's basically two things you can do. Now, we're going to be using a remote server versus a personal server. You can use personal server. All that really is it just spins up a P4 server on your local machine, and you just access that. It's kind of like the easy button, but to be honest with you, I recommend doing the remote server because you'll want administration on it. You'll want to log into it as opposed to just a personal one. So everything after this point will be a remote server so you guys can see it. So same thing like the server. So if it's just local, so if it's on the same machine, 1666, PC name, IP address, or web connection, that's where you're going to put the server. Now, your user account, if you guys are setting this up for the first time, you will probably have access to view all the users, which is what I have in the screenshot below. If you have set up permissions and you've restricted it, your users will not be able to browse that little pop-up. It'll say, hey, you can't enter it, you're not an admin, you don't have access, et cetera, et cetera. So typically speaking, you'll give them their username, they'll be able to create it, and then we'll create a workspace. Okay, which brings me to a workspace. This one I think has been confusing for a lot of people. All a workspace is basically a mapping. So if you can envision that with Perforce, we're going to have two things. We're going to have a depot, and we're going to have a copy of that depot somewhere on a hard drive somewhere attached to my computer. So what a workspace does is it is basically a mapping. It says, hey, when I pull files from this depot, I want those files to go here. Pretty straightforward, pretty basic. But the big thing that I will recommend and will say inexplicitly that you should do every single time is no matter where you put your depot, whether it's on an external drive, internal drive, wherever, do not put it in something that has a lot of characters. The reason for this is Unreal Engine has a character limit due to byte orders of 255 characters. So if you look at the bottom one here, so the C:users, every single character is ticking down from that 255. You will find very, very quickly, especially if you're working with source builds, if you have more than, in this example here, D:/P4, Unreal will yell at you. It will say, hey, I can't do this because it's too many characters, et cetera, et cetera. So my recommendation is pick whatever hard drive you want, C drive, an external drive, whatever it is, and just create a folder that's as simple as like P4. And that will be your mapping. Here's something else too that once you map this, say for example that this hard drive goes bad or something like that, but you've made a backup copy, you put in a new hard drive, but it's a different drive letter. So Perforce will be like, hey, I can't find these files. You can change your workspace root. Just be aware that when you do, Perforce is going to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and make sure all these files are here, and it will look like it's checking out every single one of those files. It's not. All it's doing is just taking your hard drive, pinging the depot, going back and forth to make sure all the files are actually there. So that's all it is. That's all the workspace is just where the files will be mapped from the depot onto your local hard drive. Okay, so this is the Perforce client. Again, it sounds like most of you guys have used this, so I won't go too deep. Now, one of the things I've done here is I've actually shown all of the tabs. Also, something to take note of is that by default, the filters everything to your username and your workspace evacuable. All you got to do is just click this clear filter, and you'll be able to see everything. Okay. The Perforce client is something that is required, and all that this is going to do is simply show your workspace, so your mapped files, in conjunction to what's on the depot. And this is what you will use to generally grab latest, sync latest. If you guys haven't done branching, I can explain that a little bit. You can do labels. You can also view workspaces. So this is what you will primarily use for your interface. Caveat being, Unreal does have an integration built into Unreal Editor that will interface with Perforce to push files for you, make a change list from directly within the editor, which is great. But just know that it's still accessing and using the Perforce client on the back end. Caveat number 2 is you'll see with UGS it does the exact same thing. So UGS, Unreal Game Sync, does not actually have Perforce built into it. It is simply using the Perforce interface, but just overlaying a different UI. So, okay. Trying to think here too. I won't go too much into this, but basically what Perforce is going to do on the client side is allow you to see pushed files, push change list, which I have here. I can go deeper into this if you guys want to, but it'll show you a change list. So what's been submitted, you can click any of these roll-ups and see, hey, what was included in that change list. This is a great thing too if somebody screwed up your project. This has happened to us many times in the studio, where somebody pushed a change or something trying to figure out, hey, who made the change? You can click on any of these files, revision graph, and if you click it, you'll actually see, oh, it was submitted by, this person. Okay, I'm going to go track them down, ask them, hey, what happened here? Can you tell me? Additionally, you can grab specific versions here so you can see what happened, roll them back, grab a specific one, push it, you name it. So a lot of things you can do in the Perforce client, but for the most part, generally speaking, if you're using Perforce, you're simply just going to be grabbing latest and you're going to be pushing changes as needed. Okay. Again, I know I kind of glossed over that, but that is generally speaking Perforce and all that. Okay. So now that we've got our Perforce server set up, we've got our depot, we've got our Perforce client being able to connect to the depot, being able to push and pull files, the next thing that we want to do is we want to leverage the permissions in there, right? So say, for example, you've got an internal dev team that's working on a project and you've got an external dev team and you want them to only be able to see certain things or be able to access certain files or have certain read permissions, write permissions. We do all this through a permissions table. Thankfully, this is very painless. So if we jump back into the P4Admin interface and we go to permissions, you can see here that we've got our users, groups, and our depot tree. So in this case, I've just clicked the users tab and I can look at all of my users. Now, the important part here is what I've got outlined in orange here. So this is where you set permissions. So in this case, if we take a look in our depot, I've got 3 projects, Project A, Project B, and Project C. Okay. What I've done here is I've said, hey, I want to make this Project A, which is a group. So I've created a group called Project A Group, and I've added a couple users to it. I want to make sure that that group has write permissions to / depot projects Project A. So that's saying that, hey, this group has full read-write permissions to this folder. Pretty straightforward. Here's something that you need to keep in mind, though. When you are creating your permissions, if you say, for example, put in / depot projects Project A, which, in fact, let me jump over to show you guys real quick what that looks like. So this is my Perforce client that's running, okay? And let me go ahead and just show all my tabs. We'll clear this. So this is my workspace, right? This is my local files. If I go to my depot view, I've got this project, right? Workspace, Project A, Project B, Project C, okay? Jump back here, right? So this group, Project A, has access to this depot right here. So if you notice up here when I tab here, so / depot projects Project A, that's how it's mapped on the server. So that's ultimately what I am trying to access. So / depot is as it's viewed on the depot. The thing I want to make note of is if I just simply put in / depot / projects / Project A, nobody would have access to it. It's important that you do a /.. So / and 3 dots. That means anything below that folder will still have all permissions inherited from that. So just keep in mind that if you're doing your permissions, all you really need to do is look at your files on the depot view and go, oh, okay, this is what I want you to have access to at the end of the /.. And then you will put those in your permissions table. Okay. There are several things you can do here. Again, when you create a new permission, in fact, you know what, let me go ahead and just jump over and I'll show you guys that real quick. So here's the P4Admin. All you need to do is just click this. You enter a new line. Now, it does take into account the hierarchy of the line, so you can move them up and down. And all you do is you can set multiple things, right? Super, don't set that for your users because that's super access. Pretty much all you need to do is read and write or be able to look at stuff. So if I just do write, I can choose my group or a user, and then I can type in what that is, put the file in folder, save the edit, and now that user will have access to that particular project. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Whew. Any questions so far before we dive into, I want to say Unreal Game Sync is going to be next.
I know I jumped in a little bit late. I was just curious what overall the software's like overall goal is. I can kind of guess, but I'm curious if I missed a key component.
Say that question again. I barely heard that. Sorry.
I jumped in like a little like late, and so I was wondering if I like missed a key component at the beginning that would explain like what this type of software is used for. I have like a vague idea, but
file versioning. Yes, so that's what we covered at the beginning. It's the reason why you'd want to use Perforce is to make backup copies of your files. So I explained a little bit earlier too, but say for example you're working in a team, you push a file to a depot, somebody else checks it out, makes a change, but as an example they delete half your level. If you didn't have file versioning software, your work would be gone, right? That's the latest file, you can't do anything. By using file versioning software, you can actually roll that back. So you can get those changes back, have them corrected, and then push it to the depot, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Loosely translated, can save your butt.
Yes.
If you were going to like hire on a contractor to work on, say, just like level design for like a month for a project, would you create their account on your Perforce server and then just give them the login, or is that something they would have to do and then just like hop in via the, I don't know, like IP or something? How would you approach that?
Yeah, so my recommendation was always to create a user for that. So like for example, in this case, I've got users assigned to a certain project. I could create another user and assign them to, say, Project A, and they would only have access to that particular project. Now, if you want to get a little bit fancier, say, for example, you're working with some, proprietary information that you don't want to have, you don't want to give them access to, but let's say, for example, they're creating, levels actually are a good one because you don't technically need engine binaries for content, right? Like they could create a level and they could push it. One of the things you can do is, so if I go to my depot here and just kind of show you, let's say, for example, I've got a couple things in here that I set up ahead of time. Let's say, for example, that my proprietary engine is Project A, right? This has everything in it. This is my Unreal project. I've got everything that I need. Now, I don't want my contractors to have access to this project, right? This is only for my internal dev team. So I create another project just called Project B. And what this has is just, maybe it's a marketplace build of the engine so they can do the level design, whatever they need for that, right? I would give that contractor permission to Project B. Now I would give my dev team access probably to both. And what I can do is I can set up in the Perforce client, it's called branch mapping. So what I can do is I can actually create a new branch here. Let's just call it test branch. Okay. I'll do okay. There we go, underscore. Maybe I don't have permissions, but let me just explain what it is. So with branch mapping, what I can do is I can specify certain logical information. So right here I've got just depot to depot, but I could set this to say, hey, in my branch, I want to have, let's say that it's content, right, maps, typically where you'd store your file. So I could say that, hey, I want my depot projects, Project A content maps, and I want that to automatically propagate to my, let's do this, copy it again, Project B, content maps, right? So essentially what I'm saying is I want the content folder, the maps folder from Project A and Project B to understand that they cross-talk. So by using a branch mapping, I can right-click, say, go ahead and run it. And what it will do is Perforce will say, hey, I've noticed that in Project B, I've got an updated file. Do you want to merge that into your Project A? Why, yes, I do. And vice versa. I can say, oh, hey, Project A has got an updated map. I'll go ahead and merge that over. So you can have both projects on your depot, but only the contractor has access to one. Your dev team has access to the other, and you can still merge between them. Does that make sense? Hopefully I didn't confuse that too much.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Okay.
So before I've used Perforce where I've like put like my 3ds Max files in the root folder, and those would transfer as well. Is it pretty common to share other files via Perforce as well, or do you typically just use it for Unreal and
No,
associate files?
absolutely. I mean, in fact, that's the nice part about Perforce is anything that you want to version, you can put on Perforce. So in my client here, what I set up for Project A, my structure is the actual project. So it's redundant because when you create Unreal project, it creates a name. So this is the actual Unreal project, right? There's my U project, my content, and my config. In that root folder, I've also put a source folder in there. And you could put a sub one in there that says Max files, My files, Photoshop, you name it. And you can put that in there. The reason I would recommend doing it this way is, let's say, for example, that you and I, Steve, are working on the same project together, and you're making some changes to, your Max file, but then you want me to take it because I can do some UVing, and then I'm going to send it back to you. It would make sense in that situation to version it on your Perforce server, because then we can exchange, and if I mess something up or deleted something from you, we can go back in and we can restore that. So is it required? No, but it definitely does. Again, file versioning really makes a lot of sense if you want to be able to grab old information or pull it back.
Sweet. Okay.
No,
So
with
Perforce is designed specifically for Unreal, and it can work with any kind of file you put.
Correct. Yeah, it can work with any kind of file. Now, something to note though is that Unreal has a lot of binary files, which binary files you can't really open up and see the contents, right? Like I could actually take this guy and I could do. Let me see, because I've got a revision graph. Let me see if I can. There is a way that I can pull that. Yeah, diff against previous reversion. We'll go revision 2. Right, because this is a text file, this can actually show me, oh, hey, this is what changed. This is version 3. This is what was in version 2. With binaries, you can't do that. But again, the nice part is it doesn't mean the information's not there. It's just you can't view it like in a text base, but you can still, grab previous versions of it and check things.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think another example where that comes into play very well is, say, for example, you've got like a character, right? A character typically is going to have modeling. It's going to have high topology. It's going to have low topology. It's going to have rigging. Might have animation, right? That's like 5 separate 5 different specialties in a production environment that may have access to that file and or change it. So you could version it in your source or wherever you put it, and once it's ready to hand off, goes to so-and-so, goes to so-and-so. Let's say somewhere in that iteration, the animator accidentally deletes, a folder that had a lot of information that you needed for that model. You can just revert it, grab those changes, copy them, grab the latest, paste it back into it. That's where it saves your bacon a lot. Cool. Any other questions on Perforce or Perforce admin stuff? Cool. Okay. We'll keep cranking along. Okay. Unreal Game Sync. Disclaimer. It is about to get seriously nerdy up in here. So for those of you guys that aren't familiar with Unreal Game Sync, it is a amazing tool. Like I said before too, Unreal Game Sync runs on top of your Perforce layer and on top of Unreal. It is a tool that was developed in-house by Epic. I want to say that they first developed it during Fortnite, realized how powerful it was, and have since rolled it into the engine. However, disclaimer, it is not just an exe you can go and open and it works. We have to do some nerdiness. Now, I sincerely hope that Epic will eventually make this into a standalone and make propagating the information in UGS a little bit easier, but for now, you can use it, but we kind of have to do some dirty work to get it up and running. Okay. I am curious, how many of you guys are familiar with UGS, have at least seen it or heard about it?
I only heard about it. I haven't. I'm like halfway in the setup already, but I'm kind of struggling with some of that stuff.
Okay.
Not too familiar because I haven't been using Unreal.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So UGS basically is a layer that exists on top of Perforce and interfaces with Unreal. So easiest graphic here. This link is down here if you guys want to follow it. The quick start guide will show you basically how it works. But in general, UGS, at least from what I've seen from a production standpoint, the most beautiful part about it is the metadata that exists with it. And what I mean by that is if you're working with Perforce, right, there's no way for you to tell, hey, is this stable? Is this good? Right? You literally just have access to files. You can push files, you can pull files, and that's really about it. Where UGS shines is it allows you to add a layer of information on top of that. So it works great for distributed teams. I will explain a little bit more, but all you need to know is that this is literally why UGS is an amazing tool. Okay. So to explain the process of how Unreal Game Sync works, right? Okay, so we're going to start here kind of in the lower left and work our way in a circle. So this is our Perforce client that exists down there, right? We just went through that. We see that we can push files, we can pull files, okay? UGS can actually access the information in Perforce and display it here, right? So we've got a change list in Perforce. Those change lists can be displayed in Unreal Game Sync. So Unreal Game Sync is constantly talking to Perforce to let us know, hey, this is what's been pushed. Now, like I said before too, some of this metadata here, Unreal Game Sync recognizes, hey, did you push code changes or did you push content changes? It'll display it here. There's our change list, whoever authored it, and if there's any other description. Okay, I'll come back to this. Second thing is this. Now, I will preface that if you plan on using Unreal Game Sync, you need to have Visual Studio installed. Community is totally fine, but understand that Unreal Game Sync, when you sync, you have the option of building the engine locally, building your projects locally. Now, I do want to say that I think you can use Unreal Game Sync for marketplace builds, but it was more specifically designed if you're going to use a source build, right? So you have access to all the code in it. Okay, so when I sync, I can grab different changes, I can go through, and I can also build. The first time you do this, it will be quite a lengthy process because it's actually going to build the entire engine on your machine. Okay, now you're probably wondering, ask the question, why on earth would I want to have a built engine on my machine? There's several reasons. If you're working with a source build, right, and there are any type of code changes that are pushed to a depot, typically speaking, when you build, those files don't automatically push. So let's say, for example, I make a change to a C++ character. I push it to our Perforce depot. You grab it, and the engine screams to you, hey, these binaries aren't built. Would you like to build them? Yeah, sure, why not? And I can't do that. I need to build it from source. The way you get around that is you create a machine that can automatically build for you. Jenkins is an example of one of those where you can set time intervals like, hey, every 2-3 hours, grab the latest, go ahead and build it and push it, right? You push those binaries. Not terrible, but of course, if, say, for example, somebody does a code change immediately after your automation, your users don't have it, they don't have access to the project. So by doing this locally, everybody has those things. Another reason, which is very important too, is because your users will have Video Studio installed and they have those binaries, if there's ever a problem with the project or a crash or something with their hardware, because you have Visual Studio and the engine files built, you can debug locally on that machine, which is simple. It's just have a programmer jump on, say, hey, let me check real quick. Oh, this is what's happening. Make the change, push it back. Okay, so if we continue here, so the project will build, and then we can open it locally on our machine. All right, so that's kind of the core loop of what you will use for Unreal Game Sync. Now, let me jump over to kind of the third and fourth thing, because this is very important. This is what we'll get into next. So when Unreal Game Sync is, again, it will pull the changes for you. It does not push those changes. You still have to use Perforce to push your changes to the depot. When you do that, this depot here, this is the most important and most critical part about Unreal Game Sync. By itself, Unreal Game Sync should be, and I highly, highly recommend should be accessing a metadata server, which is just a MySQL server. We'll go into that here in a minute. But that MySQL server is going to contain the metadata for your project. And what that means is, let's say, for example, I push some files that I worked on from the engine to Perforce. The metadata server updates and pushes it to Unreal Game Sync. Unreal Game Sync says, hey, I've noticed there's a new change. Okay, cool. One of my users grabs those latest changes and starts to build and compile the engine, but somewhere in between, an error is thrown. That loop, that feedback, UGS will say, hey, this user had a problem with this, and it will create a flag in the metadata that says, hey, this build had an issue. So your programmers, everybody on the team will see a red dot that says, hey, something's not right here. That is amazing and beautiful for production because the user doesn't have to do anything, right? They don't have to send a message to the engineering team. They don't have to say, hey, this happened. UGS will automatically grab that information and say, hey, this is broke by sending that information to your metadata server. That right there, if there's anything else you take away from why Unreal Game Sync is so powerful, is that because you will know exactly every step along the line when the project breaks. Okay. Second thing is, obviously in a development team, you're going to have both engineers and you're going to have artists, right? Generally speaking, your engineers love to break things. Let's just be honest, right? But your artists don't really want to work with broken things. They want to work with things that are good. UGS allows you to do that. So next to the sync now, there is this to drop down. And in there, you can select latest change, latest good change. So say, for example, that we're working and I say that, hey, this change list, this is good. I can actually right-click that and say, hey, this is good. You just pop say, hey, you sure? Have you tested this? But yeah, I have. It's good. Okay. My artist, if they set this, I want to sync to the latest good change, they will only sync to the latest good one so they never have to work with broken code, broken engine. They will always have something that's working. It's amazing for character artists, for level designers, anybody who really doesn't ever touch code. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions on kind of the core loop of Unreal Game Sync? Nope. Okay. If there's anything to take away, understand this. Unreal Game Sync, you need these components. You need Perforce, you need the UGS client, Visual Studio, and you need a depot. So, okay. We'll dive into this. All right. So this is the general interface, the way that Unreal Game Sync works, right? You've got our Perforce server, Perforce client, pushes information, pushes files to a Perforce depot. UGS then reads it, it builds it, compiles, and UGS will constantly be in sync with this web interface, which I'll get to in a minute, which then interfaces with the MySQL server. Okay, get ready for nerdy, but this is basically how that whole information exchange works. Perforce to a depot, UGS grabs that information, pushes information as you build, as other people build, to the MySQL server via a web interface. One of the other things too that I'll make a note of because I had here, if you recall, back in Perforce, we don't really have a way necessarily that's intuitive, straightforward, where I can just sift through, hey, let's say, for example, in your studio environment, you've got 10 different projects going on simultaneously, right? You're going to have a lot of change lists going back and forth, and you may only be concerned with one of those projects. UGS, because you add the project, will only show you the information pertinent to that project. So again, another way to help kind of sift through the flood of information. Okay, I'm going to try to blast through these fairly quickly so we don't spend a ton of time. Like I said, all of these slides will be available to you guys. We'll put a link on it so you can have it, so you can go back and forth. But these are the 4 things that you need to make UGS fully functional. MySQL database, local running website, which will use IIS, which is built into Windows. Visual Studio, you can use 2017. I recommend 2019. It is fully supported. And generally speaking, you're going to need a source build of UE4, so that's downloading off of GitHub, to generate the Unreal Game Sync.exe. Okay. That being said, out of the way. Whew. All right, metadata servers. So all we're going to do here is set up a MySQL database. Fret not, it's not as bad as it sounds. Okay. If you head over to dev.mysql.com and go to the download section, in there you're going to download MySQL as the installer. Run through this. I will show you the screenshots here. I promise this is very, very, very painless. Simply just set up as a server only. We'll then go to these guys. So you want to set up as a standalone MySQL server. Config type is you're going to set up a server computer. These are all by default. So your TCP with port 3306, and you want to make sure that open firewall. Once that's done, continue through, and that is it. So this will be running on a dedicated machine. So I highly recommend that. It doesn't, MySQL doesn't need a ton of resources, but it is important to keep in consideration that it will need some. So just a mediocre PC should be totally fine to run this. Okay. Once that's installed, you'll actually have an option to install MySQL Workbench. This is simply just the admin interface. All you really need to be concerned about when you go to here is just create a new user. So in this case, I created one called BRS, and I gave it a password. And that is pretty much it. Okay. All right. So now that the MySQL server is running, we need to do a couple other things to get it fully functioning and working. The first thing is actually to create a IIS website. So if you aren't familiar with that, IIS actually ships with Windows, but you have to turn it on. So if you just go into turn on Windows features, underneath this information services, just simply activate some of these. I left 2 links in here, so if you guys want to see it, that's how you can set it up. Okay. Cool. Any questions so far? All right. Cool. Okay. We'll do this. Give me 2 seconds because I need to use the restroom really fast, and I will be right back.
This is a lot of content. It's so many slides. It's crazy. We set up Perforce at our office, and I've had a few issues with it, just like trying to figure out how it works and how to like not break things. I'm curious if anyone else has been having issues and like what their learning struggles have been with this program, or if it's just me.
The only thing I had, I'll use, because I've been using it for years, getting it set up on a local server that I had here, an old PC, was opening up the port and getting the inbound rural you can access port to.
You have an issue with port forwarding?
Initially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. It was being blocked by private inbound about my network. That port.
So is that more a network issue or just a Perforce issue then?
That's a network issue.
Just network. Okay.
Because Windows was blocking. But for Perforce, I've been Perforce 2006.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you guys need help with that too, again, feel free to message me on there. Yeah, you will need to, if you've got, say for example, you need external access, you will have to specify with Perforce your 1666 and 1667, which is the admin one. You have to make sure that those are port forwarded. With the, in fact, if I go back, with the MySQL database stuff, that's where you will need this port 3306. Again, port forwarding is pretty straightforward. There's tons of resources out there to explain it, but you will have to forward those so it gets through. Okay, cool. So the next thing that we need to do is we actually need to create a website. So if you guys remember in that previous diagram, UGS actually accesses MySQL through a web interface. So when you turn on the IIS services in Windows, you will get the ability to open this IIS manager, which simply just search for it. It will pop up. And all we need to do in here is just create a new website. Very, very simple. Expand sites out, right-click on it, create a new website, and just name it something. And in this case, I put this, and this is actually running on that server. Under my C drive, I've got this iNet hub, which is automatically created for you when you install IIS. And all I did is I just created a new folder called UGS. So pointed this website to there, and that's it. Okay. So configuring the UGS client. And this is what kind of sucks right now, but again, hopefully in the future, this will be made a little bit easier. So if you recall, I said you need a source build, so you need one off of GitHub. And inside of the engine source programs, Unreal GameSync, you will find all the files that you need. But there's not an actual exe, so you have nothing to launch. So you have to build it. Okay. Again, I promise this won't be as bad as this. So here you can see in my engine source programs, Unreal GameSync, I've got all of these files, and there's this Unreal GameSync.sln. That is a solution. All we need to do is open this inside of Visual Studio. So when we do that, now I've kind of chopped this off, you will actually see Unreal GameSync. So what we need to do with this is we need to compile the exe. So we literally need to make the program. So to do that, there's a few things that we need to do, a few key steps. And I think, Isaac, hopefully this will help you. Feel free to jump in if at any point where you've gotten stuck with this one, but I promise if you guys follow this, it will work, because I had to do this for our studio environment, and this should get you all the way through there. Okay, so after we've opened our solution file, the next step is we need to modify this web debug and web release.config, which is in here. So if we expand out metadata server inside this web template, these are the two files we need to change. In particular, online, you'll actually put these in. 18, 19, and 20 are the lines that have been added into both of those files. I copied it here, so again, you guys can see it. Literally copy this as is. If you look at the Unreal documentation, there's a couple things missing. XT transform and XDT locator. Those two are missing from the documentation. You need those. So all we need to do here is in our connection string, set up our server, right? So where is our metadata server? Is it local? Is it on a machine? Put in the IP. For your UID, put in the username. So again, if you recall back when we set up our metadata, which will probably be hard for me to go back. When we set up that metadata server, we created that user account BRS. That's going to be my username. The password is going to be whatever I set up. That's all we need. So this will then communicate directly back to the metadata server. So add this connection string to the web release web debug. Okay. All right. You will probably get, again, if you do this by default, you will probably get a warning that pops up when you try to compile that says, hey, this is not for license. It doesn't work. All you need to do is you actually just need to go in there and add this line of code, exists not for license web.config, to the metadata server.cs proj file. What that looks like is this. So you go back to your folder, engine source programs, Unreal Game Sync, metadata server, open this metadata server.cs proj, and add these two lines in there, 140 and 141, and that's it. Okay. So again, that will solve that error. Okay. So once we've got that done, we need to go up to build, and we need to build our metadata server. I apologize, I got the wrong screenshot here. We just need to build it. Once that's done, it will actually create files for us. We need to copy those over to our IIS folder, which is, again, that website that we created in the UGS folder. Okay, once we do that, we will then open a browser, and we will put in the IP of whatever that machine is. In this case, I was testing it on the same machine that had UGS installed, and by doing localhost port 8080, port 9090, whatever you specify, API latest, you should get this right here. XML file exist. So again, lots of information here. Look at these slides if you guys need to go back. But basically, with that website running, there are the files that were published when we created and built Unreal metadata. I've copied those over. I tested it, localhost 9090 API, and I get this. If you don't see this screen, you've messed something up. You have to go back, go through the steps. But if you do, it means that you have successfully compiled the metadata information that is needed. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we need to do in this, right? So we've specified for Unreal Game Sync, hey, this is the location of the metadata server that you need to use. Now what we need to do is we actually need to compile the exe itself, right? So this is what my team's going to use. This is what everybody who's going to be using Unreal Game Sync is. When I compile that, all this information will actually be hidden to the user, but it's the information they need to be able to connect back to my metadata server. So in that, open the solution again, and this time I actually want to do the, I believe it's the deployment settings.cs. I'll show that here in a minute. But I basically need to change the paths here. So there's two things. Public static read-only string, which is the API URL, which is going to be the location of that. Now again, this can be, if it's going to be distributed, this could be something like, ugs.mydomain.com, port 9090. The second one is actually going to be your depot path. My recommendation is, since UGS is going to be a tool that can be used for any project, again, all UGS needs to do is communicate back to your metadata server and connect to your Perforce client. I highly recommend putting it in your root. So depot UGS, which is where we have it set up. Okay, so all of your users, to help you guys understand this, all of your users, whenever they're working on a project, you'll give them access in Perforce to their certain files. And generally speaking, everybody will get access to this UGS folder where they will have the exe for UGS and run it from there. Okay. All right. So these are the two things that you need to modify in that deployment settings.cs. Just those guys. So again, specifying where the metadata server is located, and localhost is if it's not just a local network, but typically this will be the IP of the machine that you'll want to use. And then, of course, where the Perforce depot root path is. Okay. One other thing to keep in mind, when you actually go to finally build the UGS client, make sure in Visual Studio you have it set to release. You can use debug. All you got to do is just click the release tab, and then we click build. If it is successful, you will get your files pushed to this engine project source, blah, blah, blah. You guys can read it, I won't say it. But basically what you get is this unstable release for UGS. And this is what this will look like. Okay? So all of that crazy hard work to literally just give us 4 files. But that's what we have to do right now for Unreal GameSync until Epic makes it a little bit easier. Okay? These 4 files are the only thing that you need to push to your Perforce server. This is what everybody on your team will use. Now, embedded in this is the information that UGS needs. Okay? So say, for example, I compile UGS on my side with access to my metadata server. I could give this to anybody. So, Steve, I could give it to you. You launch Unreal GameSync. Your GameSync will talk to my metadata server and pull information. Okay? So keep in mind that you'll have to do this for each development environment, but literally just copy it over, compile it, and you have Unreal GameSync. Okay. I think that's it. Does that all make sense? Hopefully. Convoluted?
I was just wondering, wouldn't every user have to run the installer?
No, they do not. So that's what this is. So this is the pre-compiled binaries for Unreal GameSync. So if you've done this, so say, for example, this is what I did here. This is all I have to push to Perforce. So you could log into our Perforce. I give you access to this. You download this. You simply click the exe, Unreal GameSync runs, and that's it. You don't have to do anything else on your end. So thankfully, we literally just have to do it once, and that's it. So this is kind of what it would look like. So again, I've published this to my depot. There's my 4 files. You sync it, you open the exe, and then you get everything that you need for it. Whew. 50 seconds left. Man. Okay. Any questions? Again, I know that was quite extensively deep.
I was just wondering as well, do you recommend using pre-compiled binaries and then using the automation tool to zip them and push them to a stream?
So you can. Here's my recommendation, though, because that was actually what we were using in our studio environment, which we've got about 18 contractors that access it. We had been using that for quite a while, and it wasn't inherently bad. The problem became our automation machine trying to figure out the proper sync interval, right? Like, did it compile every hour, every 4 hours? What we ended up finding was by doing that, it was great for some users because they didn't have to compile the whole engine, but we ran into more situations where, like an artist would go like, hey, this is broken. And we'd be like, okay, well, we've got 2 options. We can jump on the automation machine, manually push a build, or you can wait for 2 hours and 15 minutes till it goes again. That situation started coming up more and more as we were active in production versus when we use UGS, because every single user that's using the UGS interface is building locally, it basically negated us for ever having to push precompiled binaries, which was great because, every user after that first long sync, it would take about a minute for them, and everything was compiled and they're up and running.
All right, but I was also wondering if I wanted to do this, would then the artists only have to have the precompiled zip and switch like stream and then sync to that one, or would it also need like engine files and all the game project and the UGS thing?
So that is entirely up to you. You could do precompiled binaries on the stream, which would basically negate your artists ever having to use GameSync, which is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. that's very common. The difference would be that if you would still have to have that automation machine in there for doing the precompiled binaries anytime you push code level changes, which again isn't bad, but you're probably going to run into situations where the artist may not be fully in sync yet because again they're waiting for that. If you're using streams, technically there's a way that you could have like a main dev line and somehow branch it for artist. It's possible, but again, in my experience having done both, UGS kind of negates having to do that. Again, it'll be painful for the artist the first time they sync UGS because they're going to have to build all the engine binaries and compile everything. But like I said, after that point, I mean, it takes 30 seconds to a minute to just compile everything and they're good. The one thing I will say, like I had pointed out before too, where UGS has a major advantage is the fact that you can flag via that metadata stable builds, right? If you didn't have that metadata, you would essentially have to have two branches to your project, right? You would want your main dev line, which could break regularly, right? If coders are trying to push code changes that haven't been fully reviewed or vetted, you don't want your artist doing that. So you branch off and do a second one, which would just be for artists, which is stable. But that does also require that you basically have copies of those files. So if you've got a large project that's say like 50 gigs, right, you're taking up 100 gigs of disk space for the same project and having to branch. Whereas with UGS, you can use the one branch and just simply say, hey, at this change list, it's good. And then your artist say, hey, I just want to grab latest good changes. Cool, I'll grab that. And it just grabs those changes.
All right, but yeah, because I was trying to I was testing out the precompiled binaries thing, and halfway through, I realized that I had generated project files via the generate project files back, and then I switched stream to dev binaries, and I think there was some syncing issues. So I was kind of wondering if you would just need the zip, if the artist would just need the zip, and how would they then somehow push changes to content, for example?
Yeah. So content changes could go in just fine. It's anytime that you're going to push code changes where you're going to have to recompile those binaries. It's inevitable. I mean, if you're running a source build and your artists don't have, they don't have a built solution or built, binaries, when the engine pops up and says, hey, you need to compile these, it will fail every single time because they haven't actually built that solution, which again is what UGS mitigates because you're essentially building it on every single local machine. So everybody has a built version of the engine.
All right, thanks. That clears up a lot of confusion about this thing,
Yeah, no, I mean, in fact, the situation you're talking about too, Epic ran into that a lot because they use both regular depot and they use streams as well. UGS is kind of mitigating that altogether. Like it's actually kind of helping. Now they still use it, so I won't be presumptive in that. But again, Unreal Game Sync has some really cool tools in it that allows you to flag metadata, flag builds, or do things that essentially are what you're going to be using the streams for anyways. But you don't have to have different streams or different branches of the depot.
Yeah, because when I was setting up, it seems some articles there was like two Gama Sutra and another blog. They said Perforce UGS wanted to have this sort of structure where you had two mainline branches in one stream, one for dev binaries and the other for the project itself.
Right.
So, yeah, I just thought, I don't know, I don't know how I would go about telling the artist, okay, you gotta do this and that, how to use it. So, because there's sort of no information on it online.
Are you talking about how to use UGS or streams?
Yeah. Basically how the artist would go about working with UGS.
Yeah,
and precompiled binaries.
Yeah, so let me see if I can actually jump back to excuse me. See if I can find the main screen that we had. This may take me a second, so I apologize. No, I think it was before that. Okay. Yeah, this may be... I know I had it here, I think here. Yeah, okay. So this is that screen. So if you're talking about from an artist perspective, I've always found that, generally speaking, artists love to break things. They like to find ways to do it, especially when it comes to code. Me being an artist myself. And so one of the things that's really nice about UGS from that workflow is you literally tell your artist, hey, I want you to do this, which is in the sync now, under this to dropdown, select latest good change. And they never touch that again. And you just say sync now. So your artist will never at that point have a bad build. Because again, the way that UGS works now, it's not shown here. Let's say, for example, that you're an engineer and I'm an artist, okay? And you push this latest change list. I then open it, okay, and it tells UGS, hey, this is good. It runs. I will get a notification in UGS that says, hey, this has now been confirmed to at least be good. So all my other artists can then sync to it, and we know we're fine. I can also go in there manually and say, hey, I know this is an actual good build, which means all the artists will never grab a bad build. Now, you as an engineer, as a programmer, can go through like, hey, I'm going to break this. UGS goes, yeah, it's broken, and the artists never grab it. So it is a nice way of making sure that your, especially artists or anybody that doesn't really need to be working with code, never gets an unstable build of the actual project.
Yeah, as an artist and level designer, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really mitigates a lot too. And I think the thing to also highlight is that in that workflow, I have done nothing outside of having just one central depot for the project, right? I don't have a separate branch. I don't have a separate stream. I'm literally just using one file structure for everybody. But my artists, again, are only getting the stable stuff. My engineers can grab unstable, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that's really cool about this too is, depending on your project, if you guys have in-house QA or whatever it is, let's say, for example, that somebody opens a project and there's like a catastrophic failure, you can actually flag that change list as, hey, we're investigating it, which means everybody who's using Unreal Game Sync will not be able to sync anything past that. It literally forces your entire dev staff to pause on grabbing any file changes till you can fix it, which is a great tool. If you've ever been in production where you have a lot of moving parts, that can save your bacon a lot. Like, hey, don't try to push anything that may break this. Wait till we actually finish fixing it.
All right, cool. That's nice.
Cool. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Whew. So that will probably wrap us up. I'm trying to think here too. We'll again, if you guys want to go to the communities.unrealengine.com, that's where we'll post our next meetup. Again, we try to do it about the last Thursday of each month. Steve and I will get together to see if we'll have one next month. We'll just kind of check the schedule. Hopefully we will, but if we do, we'll definitely post in our Discord, which if you guys are here now, we'll post that we've got that going on, and we'll post to communities.unrealengine.com so you guys can see it there. So cool. If there are no... Oh, go ahead.
That was an insane amount of content. So thank you so much, Ryan, for putting so much time into putting that together. That was a lot of really, really good information that I haven't seen anywhere else. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm really curious what other subjects people would like us to talk about. I'm really jazzed about virtual production, but I personally don't have a lot of experience with it. I'm also looking at things with audio reactive graphics, particles with Niagara. If there's any topics you'd like us to explore, or if you have any projects you'd like to show off, we'd love to hear about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks a lot for the stream. I was like looking everywhere on the internet for information about this stuff, and I just came about your tweet, and I was like, yeah, finally somebody's talking about this. So yeah, thanks a lot.
So this will sound like a shameless plug. It's actually my intent to create a masterclass of sorts of setting this up. This was kind of a precursor to it, but it is actually my plan where I'm going to do kind of a video walkthrough of this entire process so you can actually see it from start to finish, because I do agree that, we use it on a regular basis, and it both using Perforce and using UGS are amazing tools in a production environment, especially when using Unreal Engine. But as you said, though, before, too, I've been there because I had to set these up, and documentation is a little sparse. It's confusing at times what you really should do versus, what did one other guy do in his environment. It can be very confusing. So, this is just bare bones. This is what you need to get to set it up, and you can go as crazy as you want to after that.
Yeah, I was going to say you totally should make this a online video or series, especially now with COVID, when everyone needs this kind of thing.
Agreed. Yes.
I am curious, because I'm sure John would like seeing a lot of this. Are the slides accessible anywhere? Or?
Yes, I'm going to be throwing these up, so I'll link it in Discord here as well. We did record the video, so I'll post this to YouTube as well on our Unreal Meetup, but I will give you guys these slides. Like I'd kind of prefaced at the beginning, I built all this and went through this with the intent that if I tried to go step by step, it would take us several hours. So if you guys are trying to set it up, you can literally follow the slides. I put all the information in it that you need. You'll run into hiccups. This is what you do to fix it. So those will be available. In fact, as soon as we're done here, I will get those linked into our Discord.
Cool.
And where could I see those videos? Where, if you're thinking about the masterclass stuff?
I will more than likely, which again, shameless plug, I will actually post those on my personal YouTube channel where I do YouTube video training stuff. I will put it there. My plan is to make that free regardless, because I think they're great tools, and so I will post it there. I'll make a link in our Discord as well here. So if you're in here as well, you'll see the announcement on it, so we can have that. I'll tweet about it too. I'll retweet it. I'll have Steve retweet it. You guys can retweet it. We'll do something. We'll do something to make sure you know.
All right, nice. Yeah, because I'm not from Kansas. I'm from Norway, but I was like, yes, nice.
Man, you drove a long way to join us tonight.
Yeah, I've been staying here for way too long, but thanks a lot for everything.
No worries.
What time is it in Norway area?
It's like almost 3 a.m. soon. So.
I haven't staying up that late, but
man, I miss the 3 a.m. nights. But thank you, man. Really appreciate you joining us too. That is a long way to join.
Yeah. I know this will help a lot. I really appreciate it, because I'm trying to set up this all alone, and I told my team I would get it done by 1 week, but it's been like 2 weeks, and kind of struggling still. So
yes, so, yeah. Hey, and if you need any help, man, just reach out to me. Like I said, we have UGS and Perforce running in our environment, and I can tell you for a fact, I was granted I had some help from my programming guys, but we set it up from start to finish. So more than likely, whatever issue you run into, we've built it. So feel free to ping me. We can jump on a video call if you need help, and I can help you get through it.
All right, cool. Yeah, I kind of want to get the precompile thing. I want to try it out and see for myself. But the metadata server as well. I was totally clueless about it. So
yeah, documentation, Unreal documentation too will throw you for a loop. In fact, I'm going to ping Epic here and say, hey, can I update your documentation? Because you missed a couple of critical steps.
Yeah, because I've done it a completely different way than you have done it. Like, I don't know. Kind of want to share a screenshot, but yeah.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions, things you guys want to talk about, chat about? If not, we'll wrap up this virtual meetup.
I do want to give Ryan and Steve a shout out. They answered a question I posted on the forum. Was having a bloom effect, basically. It was happening with one of my scenes.
Yes.
Where it was just, it would get brighter.
Yes. Yes. I think, did that fix your problem? Just doing a post-process?
It did.
Good.
Yeah, the post-process volume and clamping it to 1 and 1 worked.
Yes. Another shameless plug. I actually have a video on, if you search my YouTube, it's called Creating a Neutrally Lit Scene. That's actually where that's partially pulled from.
I'll have to go check that out.
Yeah, auto exposure adjustments are finicky, and they've changed like how to do it properly a few times now. Like what I always do when I start a project is I go to the lit mode dropdown and disable game settings, so it'll stop using the game setting default of using auto exposure. But then like when I record something with sequencer or hit play, like it immediately starts auto exposing us. Like, it's just frustrating, but I mean, just gotta do it for every project, I guess.
Yep.
Those 5 seconds of changing the settings really such a bummer for me.
I've been fighting it for hours. Playing with the lighting and going, why is this getting brighter?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it looks right, you know, in the preview and that, and as soon as I went to play, like, it's not. It made my background plane image blur out. Or saturated.
If you look in the project settings under the rendering section, you can see all the post-process effects that are on by default. Like, there's automatically a bunch of lens flare and blue and ambient occlusion, and you can turn it off there, or like you did with the post-process, just override it with 0.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I just needed it for that scene. It was a menu, main menu, and I was creating a scene for that. And so it's a space game, so there's these, you know.
Well, cool. Okay. Well, hey, that will wrap it up. So, again, thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. So, stay posted. We'll let you guys know when we hold the next meetup. And like I said, I will get these slides updated for you guys, the video updated, and I will shoot a link in our Discord. So, cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Everybody take care.
Take care, guys.
Yeah.
Later.